I'm your host, Donna Cates, and each week we'll dive into powerful stories, expert strategies, and practical tools to help you take charge of your financial future. Whether you're planning for retirement, navigating a divorce, or simply looking to build your wealth with confidence, this is your space to grow, learn, and thrive. Let's get started with today's podcast. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to introduce to you today Amanda Christian, who is a master burnout coach. I'm intrigued by that title, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me here, and hello to your audience.
Thank you. So, what I'd like to do is a deep delve into your career journey. Give us that 90-second overview of what you do and why you got into it.
Well, I guess we have to start at the beginning. Way back when I entered into working for a bank as a temporary job, and 33 years later, I dropped out. It was only supposed to be 2 years, but I was there 33. I can't do temporary, I guess, right? So I ended up working majority of my time in technology. So it's especially when I started out, it was heavily male dominated. So I was always in rooms where I was the only female. So very used to working in a male dominated environment. And I had been struggling with burnout, though I did not call it burnout. I called it, stress. I just have too much work to do, all these things. And it just got to the point where I didn't like my job. I liked some of the people I worked with, and of course the money was good, and all the things we think of. And on this outside, I looked like a success. Inside, no, I was a mess. And I did all the self-help stuff. I did retreats. I did webinars. I read books. All the things that we do, and nothing worked because I'd come back from the retreat and be right back into work. Right? I'd read the book, set it down, pick up the next one. Forget everything that I read. And so it got to the point and where I knew I had to leave. I ended up having to take 3 months long-term disability. I was kind of forced by my therapist to do that. And
for your mental health and physical health, probably, right?
Yeah, I had physical stuff going on, not as much as other people have had. So I consider myself very fortunate in that. It was more mental and just pure exhaustion. So took it out, and I'm like, you haven't been wanting to work here for years. You need to start looking at other things. So I went back and kind of went through this whole process of figuring out, because I didn't even know who I was anymore. And trying to figure that out. And then, look at my skills and my talents, and, Googled things and did research. And it was my therapist who actually brought this up. He actually wanted me to go back to school and get my master's and then get my doctorate in psychology. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to school. Just the thought was like, it was a sheer no. And he goes, how about life coaching? Because all the stuff. You need to, and I'm like, what's life coaching? He goes, Amanda, I know you. Just go study it, right? Go research and then come back and we'll talk. So that's what I did. And then because I'm me, I I did do a couple of programs, and it was just like, this isn't really teaching me what I want to know. And it doesn't align with my core, which is do no harm. And so, after a lot of research, I landed in a fantastic program. And so went through that. And actually, I ended up dropping out. I like dropping out versus retiring. from the corporate world. And about midway through that, and I actually ended up picking up a job local to where I live. Became the executive director of the local chamber of commerce because I felt I need to have some income coming in and all that. And and I had been told, it's only 40 hours a week and everything's set up and, there's no issues. I walked into a mess. And typical for me, I have to fix it, right? And so, things got progressively worse. And it was, I think, a little over a year ago, it was actually a year ago last October. I decided, no, this is not what I want. And because at that time I was back to working, 60, 70-hour weeks. And I was like, no, this is not what I want. This is not why I took this job. I want to be a life coach. And so I gave my resignation. And then actually I ended up working to the beginning of February. So it's been like a year. I've been out of that world, a little over a year, and took a month off. Actually, I'm a big U2 fan for eons, it seems like. So I treated myself and flew to Vegas and saw U2 in the Sphere, which was my other passion. Is I really wanted to see the Sphere and get behind the scenes and all that. And I was able to do a little bit of that. So that was a lot of fun for me. And came back and said, okay, I have to start, go back to square one and rebuild my business, what little business I had from before. And so it's taken me a while. I think it was about in August, towards the end of August, beginning of September, I determined, you're a burnout coach. I'm actually a burnout / leadership coach. And you need to own it. Because I would do everything all around the word burnout, but never say the word burnout. And you're like, you're just own it, Amanda. So, so that's kind of how I happened into doing what I do today. And I absolutely love it.
That is so fascinating. So you resisted it. You literally wouldn't call it by name.
Yep.
It kept calling you, and voila, you finally submitted to it, and here you are.
Yes.
What a fabulous story. So tell me, why do you think you were resisting it so much?
I think it was something around the word burnout, and there were some things, I still to this day, I'll probably always be recovering from burnout because things you think you fix something, right? And it'll go away, and then something will trigger it and it'll come back. And it's just a little bit deeper layer that we have to address. So I think for me, it was, I didn't want to acknowledge that I had burnout, that I want to say, well, it was just stress. It was, too much work to do. I was leading international teams. So, I was 24/7, 365, basically. And it was just like, the words burnout just would not come out of my mouth. There was just some barrier there. And it wasn't until I was sitting down with one of my mentors and we were talking about that. And he's good for knocking me upside the head. Saying, Amanda, you're a burnout coach. You own everything else in your life. You take accountability for everything else in your life. You need to step into this. And he goes, and he knows me. So he challenged me to. And I always rise to the challenge. So I fully stepped in.
That is so awesome. So you had to be pushed a little bit, but
Hmm.
once you got there, so you've arrived. Tell me
Yep.
about what makes you unique in the way that you're working with people who are dealing with burnout.
I think what makes me unique is out of the 33, let's say 33 years in the corporate world, probably 30 of those I spent in some form or fashion of burnout, whether it was the cyclical or, and have a little break and then go back into it, or it was just the constant, um, you know, full on fledged hardcore burnout, which I thought I could just grit through. I've gritted through everything else in my life and pushed through, and felt like, well, if I just get to, finish this project, then I can rest. Well, we all know there's never, you might end a project, but then you're going to get two more, or you'll get another assignment or whatever it is, right? There's always something there. And for me, it wasn't burnout just from my job, because you can have burnout from other things. I had my son was going through having a lot of issues, and with school and with behavior, and yes, the police were involved, and it was just a mess. So that was enough that could have caused just a plain person burnout. I also had my mother, who I was the primary caregiver for. She lived in her own place, but I was always constantly on call. I had to follow up, make sure her bills were paid. And that's another facet that could cause, depending on how intense it is or how much work it is, how much emotional toll it is, it can lead to burnout. So so I bring a couple different aspects of what burnt to the burnout table, let's say. And I know there are people that are, especially with caregivers in the home, whether you have an autistic child or like my son had ADHD and learning disabilities and all that. What you have to do as a parent, and I was a single parent, can easily burn you out just dealing with that facet. Work could be just great. That's your little escape. In my case, it wasn't. It was, I had it on three sides.
Wow. So how are you helping individuals with your personal experience? What's your work look like with them?
My work looks like, first, I always do, we kind of benchmark where they are. I think most coaches, you do some sort of evaluation at the front, what do they want to work on, all that. Um, I look at, I've been getting into human design and gene keys because mine blew me away. Didn't believe in that stuff. And it was like, friend of another mentor of mine, sister, does it, and she's like, oh, go see, give her some business, and I'm like, okay, I'll go, but it's all hokey, and it blew me away. It's because it pinpointed certain things of my personality that it was like, how could, just because of my birth date and this whole whatever it is, right, know that I need to be invited versus, you know, just kind of going up to someone and talking to them, right? Little things like that. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I've now taken on, I have my clients do that, which gives me some insight. Some say, nah, that's not me. Others say, oh my gosh, yeah, that's me. Um, but do that. We do a wheel of life where you, from a scale of 1 to 10 in different categories, where are you? And I remember doing this years ago, and like, 0 is at the center and you want to be out on the edge. 10, and my whole life was around that 0 point on all levels. As I said, I was in trouble. But so we do that. And then we move in, first is cultivating awareness. What's going on in your body, not only in your head, but in your body. And I delve into, because I'm trauma informed, certified trauma informed, I can deal with trauma. And I had a lot of trauma of my own growing up. So, both of my parents were alcoholics. One was functional, one was not functional, until towards the end. And so I have a lot of experience dealing with that, not only personally, but as, because I seem to always coach and mentor people most of my life. I was the one that they said, "Oh, you're such a wise child. You're an old soul," type thing. And so, it's just something that comes naturally to me. And so, we go through a process. I do have my signature process, which I call Soul Fire, where we go we go deep, because until you figure out, let's take something like perfectionism. Okay. Why does everything have to be perfect? And we actually kind of go back in time and figure out where those triggers came from. And a lot of this stuff, I hate to tell people, came from your childhood. And, you could have the most wonderful childhood in your life. You still experience some trauma. And so a lot of that is from your childhood. And so I do things like inner child work, where we actually go back and reparent ourselves. And, we reframe things and, allow that child, like I was never allowed to be, it was like a sin in our house to be angry. So a lot of mine was letting my inner child be angry and, deal with the frustrations and whatnot. And so, and I still do that with her today. We check in regularly. And so we do that. We do somatics work. We look, and then we do some, we don't focus a whole lot, but we do throughout. We're looking at, what does your life look like? Where do you have the most energy? Like if you're like a morning person and you get up and you're raring to go, that's your most productive work to do the deep work that you need to do, maybe for work or for something, a side project or whatever. So you want to block that time to do that deep work that you need to get done, because that's aligned with just your body and your chemistry. And then you could do not, all the other stuff later on in the day. And then some people are more night owls, right? So you might want to do all your deep work at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so we look at your, how you are just naturally, and try to, in some cases you can't, because if you're working a job, you kind of have to do things within their parameters, right? But why can't you block off 2 hours first thing in the morning when you get in the office to do that deep work? We work on things like, I know when I was in corporate, I was constantly on email. Before I left, I only checked my email 3 times a day. Once in the morning, once at noon, and then just before I went home. And, broke it up, because otherwise you're using your email like a to-do list.
Right.
And so, it's just little things like that we tweak and stuff. And I'm not a big proponent of you go in and make these massive changes. I'm like, make a small change, practice it consistently, and then we'll go to the next one. And then we'll go to the next one and the next one, because they build on each other. And
And
and especially for, because my focus is professional women ages 40, 60, primarily in the tech or finance tech industries. But it could be any male dominated industry, is they don't have a lot of time to sit for an hour doing a meditation, right? So if we can input, these quick little things that they can practice throughout the day, they get the same benefit. It's sort of like, walking. They used to say, you got to walk for an hour a day. And now I think they say you can just go walk, do a couple different walks and walk for 10 minutes and you get the same benefit, right? Same concept.
well, and I know you've seen me over here just nodding with everything that you're saying. Everything resonates, and just
Mhm.
to kind of tell you a couple of things that I just took from what you were saying is that number one, we can't solve all of our issues in one day. And if we
Yeah.
can take baby steps, you just
Mhm.
cut off that one little bite and chew on that one for a minute and
Mhm.
create a new habit with it,
Yes.
that can be empowering. And I personally had the experience of being distracted by email. I actually had the little notification thing dinging. So I was like cat and mouse, it's just, I was
Mhm.
totally interrupted 50 times in an hour, and you can't be productive in that process.
No,
Right.
you
So I
can't.
totally relate to that. So
Mhm.
that's awesome. Well, I would love to learn a couple of things. I know that you've been part like sandwich generation. You're
Yes.
literally describing that in perfect, because you're the stressed out, already overworked single mother, then you've
Mhm.
got a child that you're taking care of, and you've got a mother that you're taking care of. So
Mhm.
classic right there.
Yes.
Classic setup for burnout in every mode. But tell me, what's been the biggest challenge that you faced at this point in your life, either personally or professionally, and how's that shaped how you're doing your work now?
Up until this point was, I think, oh, and a lot of it had to do with my upbringing. Um, was I felt like I was broken. I didn't fit in. Um, that there was something wrong with me because it seemed like everyone else was doing maybe sort of the same stuff, but they seemed to be handling it. And I felt like I wasn't handling it. And it's taken a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work that I still do today. I mean, I have my own life coach. I still have a therapist. I'm constantly working on myself to finally realize, no, I'm not broken.
Mm,
I have just been in a lot of ways conditioned. There is some debate whether I was actually uh, not hypnotized. It was brainwashed from a young child for some of the things that I used to do. And why I allowed certain things to continue, because it was never, I could not say no.
mm,
I could say no to my son. Um, but anyone else, that no never came out, because that was wrong. You shouldn't say no. You need to say yes. You need to be helpful. So like I would go to the church. We would go to church, and I would have multiple jobs while I was at church. I couldn't even enjoy the service
mm.
because I was working. And that was the other thing I had to overcome was I literally remember being told I was put on this earth to work and take care of my mother.
Mm. What a burden, a heavy
Yeah.
burden for a child.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mm. Wow. Well, the one thing I can tell you for sure, I think this is going to really resonate with my audience, because so many of us we've had these experiences, even if we don't acknowledge them. So you being vulnerable and sharing your personal experience with us, I think is very valuable. So it will hopefully give others permission to stand in their own space and say, that sounds like me. Maybe I do
Mhm.
need some help. So if people wanted to reach out to you, connect with you, learn about the work that you do, engage with you, all of the things, what would be the best way for them to do that?
There's actually two ways. If you're on LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Amanda L. Christian. I think it's CMC, comma IGNLP, because I'm also a master NLP practitioner. Or you can go to my website, www.amandalchristian.com.
Okay, that's easy enough. Well, that's
Mhm.
awesome. And we certainly appreciate you being a guest today. And I thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, informed, and ready to take the next step in your financial journey. Remember, building wealth isn't just about money, it's also about creating a life that aligns with your goals and values. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with the women in your life who deserve financial empowerment too. Until next time, stay confident, stay empowered, and keep building the life you desire.